Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. I'm Elizabeth Townsend-Gard, your host, and I just wanna quilt. Well, we're back. It is 2023, and we are so ready for a new season. So during the pandemic, I got obsessed with audiobooks. I don't know if you are obsessed as well. So I thought in the spirit of that, I would do a little reading of the Just Wanna Create book. There were two ways that I've taken the knowledge that I've learned from this project and encapsulate. I guess there's three. So books for non-lawyers that are filled with law, legal law reviews for lawyers and law scholars that is filled with quilty stuff, and then a lot of little articles around the quilting world in magazines and other venues and appearances for different groups, and sort of sharing the knowledge of law and what we've learned about the quilting industry and craft industry. And so today I thought we would do a little bit of reading, and I thought we would start with the Just Wanna Create book, which is a bit long, not tonight, but just the book itself, but we would just read a bit and give back to you what I've learned from all of these amazing opportunities and conversations over the last few years. So here we go. Just Wanna Create. The book is available for sale if you want it for sale. You can go to the link as part of the episode, and we will send it to you. All right, so here we go. We are turning the pages. Can you hear it? Just Wanna Create, Copyright and Fair Use Strategies by Elizabeth Townsend-Gard. We will be looking at the preface and the introduction in this episode. Preface, a legal resource for navigating copyright and a little bit of trademark too. Just Wanna Create, Copyright and Fair Use Strategies attempts to approach the question of copyright as a means of empowerment. Many artists hide from copyright, ignore it, worry about it, or don't even know where to get accurate information from. We hope this book fills that gap and reorients the relationship of the artist to see copyright as a creative and helpful tool. First, we will look into the process of creation and the role that copyright does and does not play. We also will look at the options and realities of what happens once a creation is presented to the public, for view, for sale, or for commentary. And each chapter will explain key concepts to help the artist or author strategize as to how to approach issues that may arise. You will note that some of the examples are focused on quilting. Quilting is a $5 billion industry with creators, small businesses, and huge corporations, which we have been studying for the past number of years. We have been immersed in understanding other creative industries as well, including video games, art, street art, and tattoos, among others. But artists creating are artists creating regardless of the medium. The information presented in this book can be applied in many situations and mediums. Don't be worried that the book is limited to the quilting industry. But if you're interested, you can listen to the podcast, which you are, Just Wanna Quilt, on iTunes and other podcast platforms. Note, this particular issue is for students. The goal for students is to understand one area of art and culture, quilting, and then compare it to others and their own. So if you're listening to this and you are ready to compare it to your own space, we are happy and very excited to hear how these concepts apply in your particular space. And please come join us at our Facebook group, Just Wanna Quilt, which is quilting community and copyright and so much more. So we are delighted to have newcomers to come and play. And that is the preface. And the preface was written by Ricardo Gonzalez, who was our editor-in-chief until he went off as he was a law student, and now he's working in the patent field, and we miss him very much. Okay. Chapter 1. How to use this book. This book is an attempt to make copyright more accessible to those who are immersed in it every day, artists, quilters, and other creatives. When we paint a picture, when we send an email, when we create a quilt, we are engaging in copyright. And yet most of us are not aware or do not know anything about copyright law. And how do we know? And what we do know is often murky or sometimes confusing or conflicting. We believe that having a strong command of copyright increases creativity and confidence, and on the whole makes a better community of creativity. In my office, I have 3 zebra print chairs, and not just because I like zebra fabric, although I really do. Copyright is like one of those those chairs. It is rarely linear or black and white. Rather, it jags around, hits unexpected dead ends, and changes with the landscape on how one is using a work. This book is meant to help you understand the physics of copyright, and once you have that, the law and reasoning will make a lot more sense. Embrace its messiness. This is the law supporting creativity, and creativity itself is messy. This book has been designed as a step-by-step guide. Think of it as a friend helping you along. Copyright has its own physics, its own way of organizing the world, and this book is part of helping you understand that physics. Copyright is also a practical regulation system. Register your work, put proper copyright notice on the work, do these steps and other steps, decide what kind of right statement you might want to include on a work. All of these are practical, mechanical issues. Copyright is also filled with balancing and analyzing, particularly fair use, but in other situations as well. There are not always answers, but if you understand how copyright works, you will be able to puzzle out solutions. When we are puzzling, we are also thinking, if this is litigated, how would a court approach this problem? Of course, there are no guarantees in that answer, but one can do a risk assessment as part of your puzzling. Copyright is a weird thing. Infringement occurs millions of times a day, yet litigation is rare. We have alternative mechanisms, particularly social media platforms, to regulate behavior, and now the Copyright Small Claims Board at the Copyright Office. But even then, copyright is difficult to enforce. Social norms and community standards play an important role in this system. We will talk about that more too. Just Want to Create is part of a larger project, as you all know. Just Want to Quilt. Just Want to Quilt started as a simple project. Learn about quilting and understand the role of copyright within the quilting world. Now, over 300 and more, closer to 400 interviews later, this project has grown into a podcast, a sew-along, and so much more. We have a Facebook group that we call our members the Quilting Army, and we are learning about the quilt industry, why we quilt, and who we are. We have also interviewed famous quilters, including Tula Pink, Alex Anderson, Mary Fons, Mary Ann Fons, Ebony Love, Angie Wilson, Rob Appel, Jenny Doan, Sean Kimber, Krista Watson, Cheryl Sloboda, and Patrick Lowe's, to name just a few. We've talked to different charities and protest quilters, to historians and museum curators. We've learned about batting, thread, how fabric is made, and learned about lots of tools. I've also asked a lot of questions about copyright and other areas of intellectual property, where it fits within their and our lives in quilting. I've quilted almost every night during this project, trying to different techniques, experiencing patterns, learning EQ8, still struggling, marveling at the AccuQuilt system, and thinking as I worked about copyright. So as you read, you will see that a lot of the examples come from quilting. Do you need to be a quilter to read this book? No. Quilting stands in the place of any creative or scholarly pursuit, something where you have to have a skill, a set of tools, a common language, and one's own creativity. The production of new creative works happens. Creative is creative. Quilting stands in that place of creativity. After all the work and research, in the end, the book is about copyright. It's about translating what I knew about copyright to you, the quilter, whether you are an enthusiastic hobbyist, an entrepreneur, an industry leader, a famous quilter, an artist, a scholar, or publisher. This is Practical, a book that puts us all on the same page, so to speak. What is copyright? We have to understand creativity to better understand how the law does or does not operate, and in the end, for us to understand the boundaries, tools, and edges of the law. And that is the end of the first the first section of the chapter. Should we do a little bit more? Let's do a little bit more. Our copyright approach, New Orleans neutral ground, which is appropriate because we are in Mardi Gras season as we record this. Copyright law is complicated, and it's also political. Who is teaching copyright matters on the approach they take and sometimes colors their expression of copyright. I have spent my career creating tools and work that empowers creativity. We all create works. We all base those works on and new additions on materials that were already created. Some of those underlying materials will be protected by copyright, others won't, and we'll learn more about that. We are trying to understand the system and balance. We are all creators of copyrighted works, and we all use copyrighted works. The neutral ground. As an author, my philosophy is important. At Tulane Law School, we at the Copyright Research Lab, where the book is originating, have become known over the last decade for being like the city of New Orleans itself. Fun, of course, but more importantly, a neutral ground. In the mid-1800s, New Orleans divided itself into two camps, the French Creole side and the English-speaking Anglo-Americans on the other. These groups were divided by Canal Boulevard, which quickly became known as the neutral ground. We still refer to many green areas in our cities around town as the neutral ground, and it is where we stand for parades and special times throughout the year, and where we park our cars when the water gets just a little bit too high. Copyright in many ways is like the division of long ago New Orleans, with different camps about how protectionist and how free to be with cultural works on each side. We remain on the neutral ground. This book is to give you a real-world view of the realities of copyright in general and on the specific field, in this case, quilting. But we are not here to take sides or to espouse opinions. We are here to educate and inform and provide a context for the decisions you ultimately make, the copyright neutral zone. All right, next section, about me. I am a copyright and intellectual property law professor at Tulane University, and I just want to quilt. For the last few years, I've been immersed in this amazing, crazy, fun project that has taken over my life, my family, my office, the house, and every waking moment. I wouldn't change any of it. All of the activities, the quilts started and some finished, and the insanely great new friends made this book. I made my first quilt with my mom at age 13 in 1980, at the height of the new quilting renaissance. I remember going to a quilt shop filled with fabric and my mom thinking it was a bit expensive, picking out materials for that quilt, a pink quilt to match my room. And I remember hating one of the fabrics, even to this day, and not speaking up. I remember my mom and me and my mom binge quilting and finishing the quilt within a weekend. We tied it, and it remained on my bed until I went to college 5 years later, traveled to college with me, and now has pen stains from when I fell asleep studying. I still have that quilt today. Somehow, with all the moves and life events, the quilt has stayed with me, and I can still remember loving each and every step, including the joy of making it with my mom. I've been quilting on and off since that pink quilt, with two major intensive quilting periods. First in the early 2000s, and now since 2016. We'll come back to this part of the story shortly. The current project, called Just Wanna Quilt, began in 2017. I quilt way too late at night and often am impatient and frustrated by some of the creative mechanics I'm trying to attempt. I still sometimes hate to iron or rip out stitching, although I'm starting to love ironing a bit more. And I love the sound of the sewing machine. Sometimes I just sew strips to hear the hum I've made, sorry, sometimes I just have strips to